She's optional. Don't waste premium seating on her. Those were my son's words to his wedding planner when he thought I couldn't hear. I smiled through my tears that day, but what I did 3 weeks later made him realize just how optional his mother really was. I'm glad you're here with me today. Please follow my story until the end and comment which state you're watching from so I can see how far this has reached. At 70 years old, after raising my son alone for 3 decades, working myself to exhaustion to give him every opportunity, I never imagined I would become invisible in his eyes. But that's exactly what happened, and this is the story of how I went from being dismissed as optional to teaching everyone involved a lesson they would never forget. My name is Eleanor Whitfield, and this is the story of how my only child, Marcus, made me feel like a stranger at what should have been one of the most important celebrations of our lives, his wedding to Sienna Ashford. It all started 6 months ago on a crisp October morning when Marcus called me from his office in downtown Portland. I was in my small cottage in Beaverton, Oregon, tending to my garden, the one luxury I allowed myself after retiring from 37 years of teaching English literature at Roosevelt High School. The phone rang just as I was pruning my rose bushes, and when I saw Marcus's name on the screen, my heart filled with joy. He'd been so busy lately, and we hadn't spoken in nearly 3 weeks. Mom. His voice came through, filled with an excitement I hadn't heard since his residency match day. I have incredible news. I'm engaged. I literally dropped my pruning shears. My son, my brilliant boy who I'd worked 2 jobs to put through medical school at Oregon Health and Science University, was finally settling down at 38. He'd always been so focused on his career as a cardiothoracic surgeon, and honestly, I'd started to worry he might never find someone to share his life with. Marcus, oh my goodness, that's wonderful, I exclaimed, feeling tears of happiness spring to my eyes. Who is she? When did this happen? Tell me everything. Her name is Sienna Ashford. She's incredible, Mom. Sophisticated, ambitious, accomplished. She runs her own luxury event planning company, Sturman Affairs. She's from a very prominent family here in Portland. The Ashfords. They own half the commercial real estate downtown. You're going to love her. That should have been my first warning. The way he emphasized prominent family and the Ashfords with such reverence, as if their wealth and status were the most important things about this woman. But I was too happy, too excited at the prospect of my son finally finding love to notice the red flag weaving right in front of me. I can't wait to meet her, I said warmly. When can we get together? I could cook dinner for you both, maybe my pot roast. You used to love that. There was a brief pause, and I heard muffled voices in the background, as if someone was coaching him on what to say. Actually, Mom, Sienna suggested we meet at Laurelhurst Restaurant. She wants to make sure our first meeting is special, and she loves that place. How about this Saturday at 7? Laurelhurst Restaurant. I'd heard of it, one of those upscale farm-to-table establishments in the heart of Portland, where a single entree could cost what I used to spend on groceries for a week. But I pushed aside my discomfort. This was Marcus's big moment, and I wanted to be supportive. That sounds perfect, sweetheart. I'll be there. The rest of that week passed in a blur of nervous anticipation. I went through my modest closet 3 times, trying to find something appropriate to wear. Most of my clothes were practical, teacher wear, gardening outfits, comfortable things for my quiet retired life. Finally, I settled on a navy blue dress I'd bought at Nordstrom Rack 2 years ago for Marcus's award ceremony at the hospital. It was simple, but elegant, or at least I thought so. Saturday evening arrived, and I drove my 2008 Honda Civic into downtown Portland, feeling increasingly anxious as I navigated through the trendy Pearl District, where the restaurant was located. I found street parking 3 blocks away. No way was I paying $30 for valet, and walked to the restaurant in my sensible flats, clutching my small purse. The exterior of Laurelhurst Restaurant was understated but clearly expensive. Dark wood, Edison bulbs, a menu posted in a brass frame that listed prices I tried not to look too closely at. I arrived 15 minutes early, as I always do, and stood nervously in the waiting area, watching beautiful people in designer clothes laugh and sip cocktails. I felt completely out of place. At exactly 7 o'clock, Marcus arrived, and my breath caught. He looked so handsome in his tailored charcoal suit, his dark hair perfectly styled, every inch a successful surgeon. But it was the woman on his arm who truly commanded attention. Sienna Ashford was absolutely stunning. She stood nearly 6 feet tall in her heels, with long auburn hair that fell in perfect waves over her shoulders. Her dress was a cream-colored silk sheath that screamed expensive designer. I later learned it was Stella McCartney. Her jewelry was minimal, but clearly real. Diamond studs that caught the light, a delicate platinum bracelet, a ring on her right hand that probably cost more than my car. Everything about her radiated wealth, sophistication, and a certain untouchable quality that made me feel immediately inferior.
Mother, Marcus said, and I noticed immediately that he didn't use mom like he'd always had throughout his childhood. This is Sienna, Sienna, this is Eleanor. Not my mother, not even my mom, Eleanor, just Eleanor. As if I were a colleague or acquaintance rather than the woman who'd given birth to him, raised him alone after his father walked out, worked double shifts to pay for his piano lessons and SAT prep courses and college applications. Sienna extended a perfectly manicured hand, French tips, professional, and gave me a smile that was beautiful but somehow cold. It reached her lips but never quite made it to her eyes. Eleanor, she said, her voice smooth and cultured, it's lovely to finally meet you. Marcus has told me so much about you. I wondered what exactly he'd told her. Did he mention how I used to wake up at 4:30 a.m. to work the opening shift at the coffee shop before teaching all day? Did he tell her about the times I skipped meals so he could have lunch money for school trips? Did he share that I'd postponed my own retirement by 5 years to help with his medical school expenses? Somehow, I doubted it. We were seated at what the hostess called one of their premier tables, near the window with a view of the street, though I couldn't understand what was so special about watching traffic. The chairs were uncomfortable, some modern design that prioritized aesthetics over actual comfort, and the menu was printed on heavy cardstock with no prices listed on mine. That's when I knew I was in trouble. I'd heard about this practice at expensive restaurants, hiding the prices from certain guests so they wouldn't worry about cost. Except I needed to worry about cost. I was on a fixed retirement income, and while I'd been careful with my teacher's pension, I certainly couldn't afford to throw money around at places like this. The sommelier here is exceptional, Sienna said, barely glancing at the wine list before ordering a bottle of something French that I couldn't pronounce. Darling, should we get the oysters to start? Marcus nodded enthusiastically. Absolutely. And maybe the foie gras? I smiled and nodded along, having no idea what foie gras even was. When the server came to take our orders, Sienna spoke first, discussing various preparations and ingredients with a level of knowledge that made it clear she frequented places like this regularly. Marcus matched her sophistication, using culinary terms I'd never heard him utter in all the years I cooked for him, talking about flavor profiles and cooking techniques, as if he hadn't spent his entire childhood eating my simple, home-cooked meals without complaint. When it was my turn to order, I scanned the menu quickly, trying to find something, anything that sounded familiar and presumably wouldn't be too expensive. "I'll have the roasted chicken, please," I said, choosing what seemed like the safest option. The server nodded and took our menus. Sienna and Marcus exchanged a quick glance that I wasn't supposed to see, something between amusement and mild embarrassment, as if ordering chicken at a fancy restaurant was somehow gauche. "So, Eleanor," Sienna said, taking a delicate sip of the wine that had just been poured, "Marcus mentioned you were a teacher. How quaint. What subject?" Quaint! She'd called my 37-year career quaint. "English literature," I replied, trying to match her confident tone. I taught at Roosevelt High School for most of my career. It was challenging work, but incredibly rewarding. "Public school," Sienna said, and it wasn't a question, but more of a confirmation, spoken with the same tone one might use to say discount store or fast food. "Those kinds of students." My students. The kids I'd spent decades helping, encouraging, and believing in, even when no one else did. They were wonderful students, I said, feeling defensive heat rise in my chest. Some came from difficult circumstances, but that made their achievements even more impressive. I had students go on to become lawyers, teachers, engineers. Kudos, Sienna interrupted smoothly. Public service is certainly important. My family has always taken a different approach. We believe in building enterprise and creating opportunities through business. The Ashford family has been in commercial development for 3 generations. My grandfather started with a single property in Northwest Portland, and now we have holdings throughout the Pacific Northwest. She said this casually, as if everyone's family owned multiple commercial properties throughout multiple states. My father, Sterling Ashford, currently serves on the boards of several major corporations, and my mother, Vivian, chairs the Portland Museum of Art's Acquisition Committee. They're very involved in shaping the cultural and business landscape of the city. I noticed she had managed to drop her parents' names in a way that made it clear I should be impressed. And honestly, I was impressed and intimidated and increasingly aware of how vast the gap was between Sienna's world and mine. Marcus sat there looking at Sienna with absolute adoration, nodding along to her family history as if he was receiving Holy Writ. That's wonderful, I said, trying to find common ground. You must be very proud of your family's legacy. We are. Which is why this wedding is so important. It's not just about Marcus and I, it's about joining families, merging social circles, establishing connections that will benefit both of our futures. The way she said it made it sound more like a business merger than a marriage. Our food arrived, beautiful plates that looked more like art installations than meals. My roasted chicken came with about 3 ounces of meat, artfully arranged with some vegetables I didn't recognize, and a sauce drizzled in a pattern that probably had a fancy name. As we ate, the conversation continued to flow around me rather than including me. Sienna and Marcus discussed their upcoming trip to the Amalfi Coast in Italy, where they'd be staying at some villa owned by one of Sienna's family friends. They talked about the new penthouse they were purchasing in the South Waterfront district. Apparently, Sienna's father was helping with the down payment, which I suspected meant buying it outright for them. They mentioned the country club membership they were considering, Waverly Heights, apparently the most exclusive club in Portland, and debated whether they should also join the yacht club. I sat there, cutting my tiny portion of chicken into even tinier pieces, feeling more alien with each passing minute. This wasn't the Marcus I knew. The Marcus I'd raised had been content with simple pleasures. Hiking in Forest Park, movie nights on our worn couch, my homemade lasagna for his birthday. This version of Marcus cared about country clubs and yacht clubs and Italian villas. "Oh, Eleanor," Sienna said suddenly, as if just remembering I was there, "we have such exciting news to share about the wedding itself." "I'd love to hear about it," I said, grateful to finally be included in the conversation. "We're having it at my family's estate in West Lynne, Ashford Manor. It's been in our family since the 1920s. 15 acres of pristine grounds, formal gardens, a ballroom that can accommodate 300 guests. My grandmother was married there, my parents were married there, and now Marcus and I will continue the tradition." 300 guests. My mind reeled. I didn't even know 300 people. "That sounds absolutely beautiful," I said sincerely. "When is the date?" "June 15th. It's going to be the social event of the season. We've already hired Arabella Thornton as our wedding planner. She's the absolute best in the Pacific Northwest. She coordinated the Reynolds-Patterson wedding last year. It was featured in Portland Monthly and Pacific Northwest Bride magazine." "How wonderful," I said. "Is there anything I can do to help? I know traditionally the mother of the groom has certain responsibilities." "Oh, that's so sweet," Sienna said, with that same condescending tone she'd used when calling my teaching career quaint. "But honestly, everything is being handled by Arabella and her team. She has connections with all the top vendors, caterers, florists, photographers. We want to make sure everything is absolutely perfect, and that means working with professionals who understand our vision." Our vision. Not a vision that included me, apparently. Of course, I said quickly. I just meant, maybe I could help Marcus with something, picking out his tuxedo or hosting a small family gathering. Mother, Marcus interrupted, and his tone was gentle but firm. Sienna's family has certain expectations about how things should be done. This wedding is important not just personally, but professionally. There will be several of the hospital's board members attending, some of Sienna's father's business associates, people from the country club. Everything needs to be appropriate. Appropriate. The word hung in the air like an accusation, as if I, with my teacher's pension and my modest cottage and my sensible shoes, might do something inappropriate and embarrass him in front of his new social circle. I should have said something then. Should have asked him point blank if he was ashamed of me. But I didn't. Instead, I smiled and nodded and told myself I was being oversensitive. This was just pre-wedding stress. Once they got to know me better, once the wedding was over and we could all relax, things would improve. I was so wrong. The check arrived in a leather folder, and before I could even think about offering to contribute, Sienna handed over a black American Express card. One of those cards with no spending limit that you have to be specially invited to own. "Dinner is on me," she said with a smile. "Consider it a welcome to the family." I should have felt grateful. Instead, I felt like a charity case. We said our goodbyes outside the restaurant, and Sienna air-kissed me both in that way rich people do, getting close enough to hear the kiss, but not actually making contact. "We'll be in touch about wedding details," she said, already turning toward the valet who was bringing around a silver Mercedes SUV that looked like it had driven straight out of a showroom. Marcus hugged me briefly. "Thanks for coming, Mom. I'm glad you got to meet Sienna." "She seems lovely," I lied. "I'm so happy for you." I watched them drive away in that expensive car, heading back to their expensive life, and I walked 3 blocks to where my aging Honda sat under a streetlight. The contrast wasn't lost on me. Over the next 5 months, I barely heard from Marcus. When I called, he was always busy, in surgery, in meetings, at wedding planning sessions with Sienna and her family. I was invited to exactly 2 wedding-related events. A massive engagement party at Ashford Manor where I knew exactly no one and spent 3.5 hours standing awkwardly by the catering table, nursing a glass of champagne and watching wealthy people network, and a dress fitting where Sienna's mother, Vivian Ashford, made it crystal clear that my opinion on anything was neither needed nor wanted. Vivian was a formidable woman in her mid-60s, dressed in head-to-toe Burberry, with steel gray hair cut in a severe bob, and the kind of posture that suggested she'd attended finishing school. She looked at me during that fitting the way one might examine a stain on an expensive carpet, with barely concealed disdain. "We're thinking champagne and gold for the mother's dresses," Vivian announced, not asking but informing. "Sienna wants the aesthetic to be sophisticated and cohesive. Everything needs to photograph well for the professional albums we're having made." I didn't particularly like champagne gold. It washed out my complexion and made me look sallow. But I nodded along. "Of course, you'll need to visit Madame Dupont's boutique in the Pearl District," Vivian continued, consulting her leather planner. "It's where I get all my formal wear. They understand the level of quality we expect. I'll have my assistant, Regina, call ahead to let them know you're coming." Madame Dupont's boutique turned out to be one of those places where they buzzed you in through a locked door, and a woman in all black asked you to remove your shoes before stepping onto the pristine white carpet. The dresses didn't have price tags. You had to ask, which was clearly designed to weed out people who couldn't afford to shop there. The champagne gold dress they selected for me was beautiful, I had to admit. But when the sales associate discreetly whispered the price, $1,200, I nearly choked. $1,200 for a dress I would wear once? That was 2 months of my grocery budget. But what choice did I have? This was my son's wedding. Vivian had made it clear that showing up in anything less than Madame Dupont's would be unacceptable. So I put it on a credit card I'd been saving for emergencies, telling myself that Marcus's happiness was worth the debt. I should mention that throughout all of this, the months of wedding planning, the exclusive events, the expensive expectations, no one ever asked me about my finances. No one inquired whether I could afford any of this. They simply assumed I could. Or perhaps more accurately, they didn't care whether I could or not. The Ashfords existed in a world where money was no object, and they expected everyone in their orbit to keep up. The breaking point came 3 weeks before the wedding. I had called Marcus on a Tuesday afternoon to ask about the rehearsal dinner details. I had received no formal invitation, no information about timing or location, and with less than a month to go, I was starting to panic about making arrangements. He answered on the fourth ring, sounding distracted and impatient. "Mom, I'm actually in the middle of a planning meeting right now. Can this wait? I just need to know about the rehearsal dinner. Where is it? What time? What should I wear? Arabella has all those details. She'll be sending out a final information packet to everyone next week." "Okay, but I also wanted to ask you about seating at the reception. I wasn't sure where I'd be seating and—" There was a long, uncomfortable pause. I could hear muffled voices in the background, and then Marcus spoke again, his voice careful and measured. "About that, Mom. Sienna and I have been talking with Arabella about the reception layout, and we've decided to keep the head table small, just the two of us and the wedding party. It photographs better that way. More intimate, you understand, right?" My heart sunk, but I tried to keep my voice steady. "Oh, I see. So where will I be seating?" "Arabella is handling all the seating arrangements. Everything's taken care of. Don't worry about it." But his tone made me worry. There was something he wasn't saying, something deliberately being kept from me. "Marcus, sweetheart, I'm your mother. Surely I'll be seated somewhere prominent." "Mom, I really have to go. We'll talk about this later, okay?" He hung up before I could respond, leaving me standing in my kitchen with the phone still pressed to my ear, a cold feeling of dread settling in my stomach. 2 days later, I decided to do something I'd never done before. I drove to Marcus's penthouse in South Waterfront, unannounced, carrying a container of his favorite homemade cookies, chocolate chip with pecans and sea salt, the same recipe I'd been making for him since he was 6 years old. The building was one of those ultra-modern glass towers with a doorman, a concierge, and probably a ratio of amenities to actual living space that would make a mathematician weep. The lobby had a water feature, abstract art on the walls, and furniture that looked uncomfortable but expensive. The doorman, a young man in a crisp uniform, looked at me with barely concealed disdain when I approached. "I'm here to see Marcus Whitthorpe. I'm his mother, Eleanor." He picked up a phone, pressed some buttons, and murmured into it quietly. After a moment, he nodded. "You can go up, 28th floor, penthouse unit." The elevator was glass-walled and stomach-droppingly fast. As I rose through the building, I could see all of Portland spreading out below me. The Willamette River, the bridges, Mount Hood in the distance. This was Marcus's world now, quite literally looking down on everyone below. When the elevator doors opened directly into the penthouse foyer, Marcus was standing there, and his expression was not one of pleasant surprise. "Mom, what are you doing here?" "I brought you cookies," I said, holding up the container with forced cheerfulness. "Your favorite. I thought maybe we could have coffee and talk. It feels like I haven't really seen you in months." He glanced behind him into the apartment, and I could hear voices, multiple voices, coming from somewhere inside. "This really isn't a great time," he said, not moving to let me in. "Sienna's parents are here, and we're going over final wedding details with Arabella." "Oh, I'm so sorry," I said quickly. "I should have called. I could just leave the cookies and—" "Eleanor," Sienna's voice called from inside, and it didn't sound welcoming. "Is that Marcus's mother?" Before either of us could respond, Sienna appeared in the foyer looking absolutely perfect, in ivory silk pants and a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my mortgage payment. Behind her, I could see into the vast open-plan living space, floor-to-ceiling windows, minimalist furniture, a view that must have cost a fortune. How unexpected, Sienna said, her smile tight and controlled. We're actually in the middle of something rather important. I'm so sorry to interrupt, I said quickly, feeling my face flush with embarrassment. I just wanted to bring Marcus some cookies. I should have called first. Sienna took the container from my hands without really looking at it. How thoughtful. I'll have Maya put these in the kitchen. Maya. They had staff. My son now employed people to put cookies away. Actually, Sienna continued, and something about her tone made every nerve in my body stand on alert. Since you're here, maybe you could help settle something we've been discussing. Arabella. She turned and called into the apartment. A woman in her mid-40s appeared, dressed entirely in black with a tablet computer clutched to her chest like armor. This must be the famous Arabella Thornton. Behind her, I could see Sterling and Vivian Ashford seated on a white leather sofa that probably cost more than my car, looking at me with expressions of polite interest that barely masked their annoyance at this interruption to their important planning session. Arabella, this is Eleanor Whitfield, Marcus's mother. Eleanor, this is Arabella Thornton, our wedding planner. She extended her hand with professional warmth. Mrs. Whitfield, how lovely to finally meet you. We've been working so diligently to create the perfect celebration for Marcus and Sienna. I'm sure it will be beautiful, I said, though I was wondering why, if they'd been working so diligently, I hadn't been included in any of the planning. Arabella was just showing us the updated seating chart, Sienna said, and the way she said it, with a sort of barely concealed satisfaction, made my stomach clench with anxiety. We've run into a bit of a space issue at the manor. Arabella pulled up something on her tablet, her expression professionally neutral. Yes, so we have 300 confirmed guests, and the ballroom at Ashford Manor, while spacious, does have limitations in terms of optimal flow and ambiance. I stood there, my mouth dry, waiting for whatever bomb they were about to drop. The thing is, Sienna continued, moving closer to Marcus and linking her arm through his, we need to maximize the seating arrangements for our VIP guests. My father's business associates from Ashford Development, several board members from OHSU Hospital, our friends from Waverly Heights, Marcus's colleagues from the cardiac unit. These are people who need to be accommodated in the premium seating areas. I understand, I said, though I didn't like where this was going. That makes sense. So we were discussing with Arabella whether we might need to make some adjustments to the family seating. That's when Marcus spoke. My son, my only child, the boy I'd raised alone, who I'd sacrificed everything for. He finally opened his mouth, and what came out shattered my world. She's optional. Don't waste premium seating on her. The words hung in the air like poison. No one moved. No one breathed. I felt like I had been physically struck. My vision actually blurred at the edges, and I had to grip the doorframe to steady myself. I'm sorry, I whispered, hoping desperately that I'd misheard, that my 70-year-old ears had failed me at this crucial moment. Marcus's face flushed red, but he didn't take it back. Instead, he tried to justify it, to explain away the inexplicable. Mom, what I'm trying to say is, you have to understand the situation here. This wedding is about making connections, about establishing Marcus and Sienna as a power couple in Portland's medical and business communities. You don't really know anyone who will be there. You'd probably be more comfortable somewhere quieter, away from all the networking and social politics. I stared at him, this stranger wearing my son's face, and couldn't find words. Sienna squeezed Marcus's arm supportively. Eleanor, please don't take this personally. It's purely logistical. The wedding is really designed for our professional and social circles. Family is important, of course, but we have to prioritize strategically based on who can benefit our future the most. Arabella was typing something on her tablet.
clearly uncomfortable with the family tension, but too professional to show it beyond a slight tightness around her eyes.
Vivian Ashford spoke up from the sofa, her voice cool and aristocratic. Eleanor, you must understand that weddings at this level are about more than sentiment. They're investments in social capital. Every seat represents an opportunity. And apparently, I wasn't worth the opportunity cost. Where exactly? I asked, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to control it. Were you planning to seat me? Arabella cleared her throat delicately. We were considering table 47, near the service entrance to the kitchen. It's a perfectly lovely table, just somewhat removed from the main reception area. You'd be with some of Marcus's distant cousins from his father's side and a few +1s from out of town who don't really know anyone. Table 47, near the service entrance, with people from my ex-husband's family, the man who'd abandoned us 30 years ago, who'd contributed nothing to Marcus's upbringing, whose relatives I'd met maybe twice in my entire life, while strangers, business associates, country club acquaintances, people whose only connection to my son was professional or social convenience, would be seated in places of honor. I looked around that pristine penthouse with its $1,000,000 view at these people in their designer clothes discussing my son's wedding like a corporate merger and felt something fundamental break inside me. I see, I said quietly. Well, I certainly wouldn't want to take up a premium seat from someone more important. Mom, don't be like that, Marcus started, reaching toward me. I stepped back, away from his touch. No, you're absolutely right, I said, my voice taking on a strange calm that surprised even me. This is your wedding, and you should have exactly the guests you want, seated exactly where you want them. After all, it's about strategic investments, right? Social capital. And my voice caught slightly, I'm just not worth the investment. Eleanor, you're misunderstanding, Sienna began. Am I? I looked directly at her, then at Marcus, then at each person in that room who had been so carefully planning where to hide me. Let me ask you all something. What exactly is the definition of optional? Because from where I stand, it means unnecessary, disposable, unimportant enough to be removed without any loss. Marcus opened his mouth, then closed it. No defense came. I turned to him, my only child, and asked the question that was tearing my heart apart. Marcus, I need you to answer me honestly. When did I become optional to you? Was it when you became a surgeon? Was it when you met Sienna? Or have I always been optional and I was just too blind to see it? The silence that followed was devastating. I see, I said quietly. I turned toward the elevator, my legs feeling like they might give out at any moment. Mrs. Whitfield, Arabella called after me, her professional mask slipping just enough to show genuine discomfort. We'll send you all the wedding details next week. The ceremony starts at 4. I didn't respond. I stepped into that glassed elevator and watched Marcus's face disappear as I descended, leaving his penthouse in the clouds and returning to the ground where people, like me, apparently belonged. The drive home to Beaverton was a blur of tears and traffic lights. By the time I pulled into my driveway, my face was wet and my chest ached from trying not to sob while navigating the highway. I stumbled into my small cottage, my modest, ordinary, not good enough for premium seating cottage, and collapsed on my worn sofa, surrounded by photographs of Marcus at every stage of his life. Baby Marcus in my arms at the hospital, just the two of us against the world. Toddler Marcus on his first day of preschool holding my hand. School-age Marcus at his spelling bee, beaming as he won first place. Teenage Marcus at his high school graduation, hugging me tight and whispering, "We did it, Mom."
college Marcus, medical school Marcus, residency Marcus, every milestone, every achievement, documented and displayed like a shrine to the boy who had once loved me unconditionally. When had that love become conditional? When had I gone from being his hero to being optional? I cried until I had no tears left, until my throat was raw and my eyes were swollen. I cried for the relationship I'd lost, for the son I didn't recognize, for the future I had imagined that was never going to exist. I cried for that stupid champagne gold dress hanging in my closet that cost me $1,200 I didn't have, for a wedding where I'd be hidden near the service entrance like an embarrassment. But somewhere between the crying and the heartbreak, as the light faded from my windows and my cottage fell into darkness, something else began to grow inside me. Something harder and colder than grief. A realization. If I was optional to Marcus, if my presence at his wedding was considered a liability rather than a blessing, then perhaps it was time for me to show him what it truly meant when his mother became optional. I raised that boy alone. I sacrificed my own happiness, my own opportunities, my own life to give him everything he needed to become the successful man he is today. And he had just told a room full of people that I wasn't worth a decent seat at his wedding?
Well, Marcus Whitfield was about to learn a very important lesson that I'd somehow failed to teach him growing up. Actions have consequences. I stood up, wiped my face, and walked to my desk. I opened my laptop and began to search. Wedding planners, event coordinators, the Ashford family, Sterling Ashford's business dealings, Ashford Manor. Everything I could find about the people who had just humiliated me. The wedding was 3 weeks away. That was 3 weeks to find out everything I needed to know. 3 weeks to discover whether the perfect Ashford family and their perfect wedding had any cracks I could exploit. I didn't know it yet, but that evening of research would lead me to discoveries that would change everything. Secrets that would give me the power to show my son and his bride exactly what happens when you treat the wrong person as disposable. And trust me, before this was over, Marcus would understand that his mother was anything but optional. The morning after being called optional at my son's penthouse, I woke up at 5:47 a.m. with swollen eyes and a pounding headache. For a moment, lying in my bed staring at the ceiling of my modest bedroom, I wondered if the previous day had been a nightmare. Maybe I dreamed the whole terrible scene. The cookies I'd brought being dismissed, the wedding planner's uncomfortable expression, Sienna's cold calculation, and worst of all, Marcus's words. "She's optional. Don't waste premium seating on her." But then I turned my head and saw my laptop still open on my nightstand, the screen dark but the power light glowing. I'd fallen asleep sometime after 2 a.m., exhausted from hours of research into the Ashford family, their business dealings, and anything else I could find about the people who had so casually dismissed me. No, it hadn't been a dream. It had been real, and it had happened, and now I had to figure out what to do about it. I dragged myself out of bed and made coffee, my hands still trembling slightly from emotional exhaustion. As the coffee brewed, I caught sight of my reflection in the kitchen window, a 70-year-old woman with gray hair standing on end wearing an old nightgown, looking every bit as defeated as I felt. But then I remembered something my own mother had told me decades ago, after Marcus's father had walked out on us. "Eleanor, they can make you feel small, but only if you let them. You get to decide how this story ends." I'd spent 30 years raising Marcus alone, working double shifts, sacrificing everything. I'd earned the right to be more than optional in his life. And if he couldn't see that, if he'd been so blinded by wealth and status that he'd forgotten where he came from, then maybe it was time for a reminder. I poured my coffee and sat down at my small kitchen table with my laptop, ready to continue where I'd left off. But before I could open it, my phone buzzed with an incoming call. Marcus. My heart clenched. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to let it go to voicemail, to avoid another painful conversation. But another part, the part that had spent 30 years being his mother, couldn't help but hope that maybe he was calling to apologize, to tell me he'd been wrong, that of course I wasn't optional. I answered on the third ring. Hello? Mom? His voice was tight, uncomfortable. We need to talk about yesterday. Yes, I said carefully. We do. There was a pause, and I heard him take a breath. Look, I think there was a misunderstanding. When I said you were optional, there was no misunderstanding, Marcus. I interrupted, my voice surprisingly steady. You said exactly what you meant. I'm optional. I'm not worth premium seating. I'm an embarrassment to your new life. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? I asked. Explain it to me, Marcus. Explain how telling your wedding planner not to waste good seating on your mother could possibly mean anything else. Another pause. Longer this time. When he spoke again, his tone had shifted from apologetic to defensive. Mom, you have to understand the position I'm in. This wedding isn't just about Sienna and me. There are expectations. Her family has invested a lot in making this perfect. Her family has invested? I repeated, feeling anger begin to burn through my grief. Marcus, I invested 30 years in you. I invested every dollar I had, every hour of sleep I lost, every dream I gave up. I invested my entire life in making sure you became the man you are today. And now you're telling me I have to understand your position? That's not fair. Fair? My voice rose, despite my efforts to control it. You want to talk about fair? Is it fair that I worked 2 jobs so you could take piano lessons? Is it fair that I drove a car held together with duct tape so you could have a decent car for college? Is it fair that I postponed my retirement for 5 years to help with your medical school expenses? I never asked you to do any of that. The words hit me like a physical blow. I actually gasped. You never asked me to, I whispered. Marcus, you were my son, my child. I did those things because I loved you, because I wanted you to have opportunities I never had. And you never asked me to? That's what you're saying to me right now? Mom, I'm just saying that you made those choices. I'm grateful, I really am, but I can't spend the rest of my life feeling guilty about sacrifices you chose to make. I closed my eyes, feeling tears threatening again. Is that what Sienna tells you? That you shouldn't feel guilty? That I made my choices and now you don't owe me anything? Sienna helps me see things clearly, he said, and there was a defensive edge to his voice now. She helps me understand that I can't let guilt control my decisions. I have to think about my future, our future, and I'm not part of that future. I finished for him. Except as someone to hide near the service entrance. God, Mom, why do you have to be so dramatic about everything? It's just seating arrangements. It's not like we're uninviting you from the wedding. You're being unreasonable. Unreasonable. I was being unreasonable for being hurt that my only child considered me optional. Marcus, I said, my voice dropping to something cold and controlled, let me ask you something. If our positions were reversed, if I were getting married, and I told the planner not to waste premium seating on you, that you were optional, how would you feel? Silence. That's different. How is it different? Because I'm not... He stopped himself. But I knew where that sentence was going. Because I'm not embarrassing, because I'm not poor, because I'm not the one who doesn't fit in with your new social circle. Say it, Marcus. Finish that sentence. I think we should talk about this later when you're calmer, he said instead. I am calm. Perhaps for the first time in months, I'm seeing things very clearly.
Mom, please, the wedding is in 3 weeks. Can we just get through it without all this drama? Can you just accept the seating arrangement and not make this harder than it needs to be? And there it was, the real reason for his call. Not to apologize, not to make things right, but to manage me, to make sure I wouldn't cause problems at his perfect wedding. You want me to accept being called optional, I said slowly. You want me to smile and sit at table 47 near the service entrance and pretend that everything is fine. That's what you're asking. I'm asking you to support my marriage, to be happy for me. I am happy that you found someone you love, but I'm not happy about being treated like I'm worthless. There's a difference, Marcus. He sighed, and I could practically hear him checking his watch, calculating how much longer he had to deal with his difficult mother before he could get back to his important life. Look, I have to get to the hospital. Can we agree to table this discussion? Maybe we can have lunch next week and talk things through when emotions aren't so high. Maybe, I said noncommittally. Okay, good. I'll have Sienna set something up. Love you, Mom. He hung up before I could respond, before I could say I loved him too, or ask him if he really meant it, or point out that he'd just managed me like a difficult patient rather than actually addressing anything I had said. I sat there with the phone in my hand, staring at the screen, and felt the last thread of hope I'd been clinging to finally snap. Marcus wasn't going to change his mind. He wasn't going to suddenly realize how much he'd hurt me. He'd called not to apologize, but to smooth things over, to make sure I wouldn't embarrass him at his perfect wedding. Well, if he thought I was going to sit quietly at table 47 and accept my role as the optional mother, he was very wrong. I opened my laptop and continued my research with renewed determination. The internet is a remarkable thing. In the old days, if you wanted to find out about someone's business dealings or family history, you'd have to dig through public records and newspaper archives. Now, everything is online if you know where to look. I started with Sterling Ashford, Sienna's father and the patriarch of the family fortune. Ashford Development Corporation had an impressive website showcasing their portfolio. Dozens of commercial properties throughout Portland and the Pacific North. Shopping centers, office buildings, mixed-use developments. According to their own promotional materials, they'd been building Portland's future since 1962. But as I dug deeper, clicking through news articles and business filings, I started to notice some interesting patterns. 3 years ago, there was a controversial development project in Northeast Portland, a historic neighborhood where Ashford Development Corporation had bought up several buildings promising to revitalize the area. Community groups had protested, saying the development would displace longtime residents and small businesses. The project had eventually gone through, but not without significant opposition and negative press. I found articles in the Portland Tribune and Willamette Week detailing the controversy. Interviews with displaced business owners, photos of protests. And through it all, Sterling Ashford's quotes defending the project. Progress requires difficult decisions. We can't let sentiment stand in the way of economic development. Those who refuse to adapt will be left behind. The same cold calculation that his daughter had shown when discussing my seating arrangements, making difficult decisions about who mattered and who didn't.
I kept searching and found something even more interesting. 2 years ago, Ashford Development had been sued by a group of investors who claimed Sterling had misrepresented the potential returns on a commercial property investment. The case had been settled out of court, terms undisclosed, but the court filings were still accessible online. I downloaded them and began reading. The investors claimed that Sterling had shown them inflated projected returns,
failed to disclose significant structural problems with the buildings, and then used their investment money to cover debts on other properties. It was a classic shell game, taking money from one project to pay for another, keeping all the plates spinning while pocketing profits. The case had been settled, so nothing was ever proven in court, but the accusations were there in black and white, and where there's smoke, there's usually fire. I sat back, thinking. This was useful information, but I wasn't sure yet how to use it. I wasn't trying to destroy Sterling Ashford's business. I just wanted my son to see that the family he was marrying into wasn't as perfect as they appeared. But then I found something else, something that made my heart race. Buried in a local business journal from 6 months ago was a small article about Ashford Development's current projects. One line caught my attention. Ashford Development is currently seeking additional investors for their Riverside Plaza development, with construction scheduled to begin in early summer. Riverside Plaza. I'd heard Marcus mention that project. He'd said something about Sterling giving him an opportunity to invest, calling it a ground floor opportunity for someone with capital to spare. I searched for more information about Riverside Plaza and found the investment prospectus that Ashford Development had put together. It was publicly available online, designed to attract investors with promises of significant returns. As I read through it, my stomach began to sink. The prospectus claimed that the property had already secured major tenant commitments, a boutique hotel chain, several upscale restaurants, luxury retail spaces. The projected returns were impressive, 18 to 22% annually over 5 years. But something felt off. I'd spent 37 years teaching English literature, not business, but I'd learned to spot inconsistencies in writing. And there were inconsistencies here. I started cross-referencing the claims in the prospectus with other sources. The boutique hotel chain mentioned as secured tenant? I found their press releases and investor reports online. No mention of any Portland expansion. The upscale restaurants? 2 of them had recently announced they were focusing on East Coast markets only. The luxury retail commitments? Also suspiciously unverifiable. I spent the next 3 hours digging deeper, making notes, following leads from one source to another, and slowly a picture emerged that made me feel sick. Riverside Plaza looked like it might be a fraud. The secured tenants didn't actually exist. The projected returns were based on occupancy rates that seemed impossible given the current Portland commercial real estate market. The construction timeline was ambitious to the point of absurdity. And most damning of all, I found a pattern. Sterling Ashford had used this same playbook with other projects that had either failed or dramatically underperformed their projections. And Marcus had invested in this. I found confirmation in my own email records. 2 months ago, Marcus had sent me a brief email, one of the few times he'd contacted me during the wedding planning chaos. He'd been excited, telling me about this incredible opportunity that Sterling had offered him, a chance to invest $250,000 in a development project that would return significant profits. $250,000? That was a fortune to me, but apparently pocket change in Marcus's new world. At the time, I'd been happy for him, proud that he was being included in his future father-in-law's business dealings. I'd thought it meant Sterling respected him, saw him as part of the family. Now, I realized it meant something entirely different. Sterling was using Marcus, taking his money for a questionable project, perhaps to cover problems with other investments, just like those investors had accused him of doing before. And Marcus, so dazzled by wealth and status, so eager to prove himself worthy of the Ashford family, probably hadn't done his due diligence. He had trusted Sterling because he wanted to belong to their world. My son was being conned, and he had no idea. I sat back from my laptop, my mind racing. This was it. This was the leverage I needed. Not to hurt Marcus, I could never do that, but to open his eyes, to make him see that the Ashfords weren't the perfect family they thought they were, that their wealth and sophistication masked some ugly truths. But I needed more proof. I needed something concrete that would be impossible to dismiss. I picked up my phone and called an old colleague from Roosevelt High School. Jim Patterson had been the economics teacher for 20 years before retiring, and he'd always had a side interest in real estate investment. If anyone could help me understand what I was looking at, it would be Jim. "Eleanor," he answered warmly. "What a surprise! How are you?" "I'm well, Jim. Listen, I need your help with something. Do you know anything about commercial real estate development, investment prospectuses, that sort of thing?"
Some, he said cautiously. Why? You're not thinking of investing your pension in something risky, are you? No, nothing like that, I assured him. It's about Marcus. I think he might have made a bad investment, and I'm trying to understand if my concerns are valid or if I'm just being an overprotective mother. I explained the situation, not the wedding drama, just the investment details. I sent him the prospectus and the information I'd found online. Jim was quiet for a long time after reviewing everything. "Eleanor," he said finally, his voice serious, "I don't want to alarm you, but this looks very problematic. The projected returns are unrealistic. The tenant commitments appear to be fabricated or, at best, exaggerated. And the timeline doesn't account for the normal delays in commercial construction. If Marcus invested $250,000 in this, he's likely to lose most, if not all of it." My heart sank, even though I'd suspected as much. "Are you sure?" "I'd want to dig deeper to be certain, but based on what you've shown me, this has all the hallmarks of a scheme to raise quick capital. The developer, Sterling Ashford, you said, is probably using new investor money to cover obligations on older projects. It's not quite a Ponzi scheme, but it's in that neighborhood." "What should I do?" "Tell Marcus immediately. Show him this research. If he acts quickly, he might be able to pull his investment before construction begins. There's usually a clause in these agreements allowing investors to withdraw if certain milestones aren't met. But he needs to act fast." I thanked Jim and hung up, then sat staring at my phone. This changed everything. I'd been planning to use the information about Sterling's questionable business practices to show Marcus that the Ashfords weren't perfect. But now it was more urgent than that. My son was about to lose $250,000 to his future father-in-law's failing development scheme. I had to tell him. But would he listen? After this morning's phone call, after months of pushing me away, would he believe me? Or would he think this was just his bitter, jealous mother trying to sabotage his wedding? I decided to try anyway. I called Marcus's cell phone, but it went straight to voicemail. He was probably in surgery. I tried the hospital, but they said he was in the OR and couldn't be disturbed. I left a message. "Marcus, it's Mom. I need to talk to you urgently. It's not about the wedding. It's about your investment in Riverside Plaza. Please call me back as soon as you can. It's important." Then I waited. Hours passed. I tried to distract myself with housework, with reading, with anything that would keep me from obsessively checking my phone, but nothing worked. By evening, Marcus still hadn't called back. At 7:30 p.m., my phone finally rang. But it wasn't Marcus. It was Sienna. "Eleanor," she said, her voice cold and clipped, "we need to talk about the message you left Marcus today." My stomach dropped. "I need to speak to Marcus, not you." "Marcus is busy. He asked me to handle this. What's this about Riverside Plaza?" "It's a private matter between Marcus and me." "Eleanor, let me be very clear about something," Sienna interrupted. "Marcus and I are getting married in 3 weeks. We make decisions together. We handle our finances together. If you have concerns about one of our investments, you discuss them with both of us. Now,
What is this about? I took a deep breath, trying to control my anger. I've been researching Riverside Plaza, and I have serious concerns that it may not be a legitimate investment opportunity. I think Marcus should review his agreement and consider withdrawing his money. There was a long pause. Let me get this straight, Sienna said, and I could hear the barely contained rage in her voice. You've been investigating my father's business? You've been digging into our family's private financial matters? I was worried about Marcus. You were interfering. You were sticking your nose into things that are absolutely none of your business. Marcus is my son, and if he's being... Eleanor, I'm going to say this once, and I need you to listen very carefully. Sienna's voice dropped to something low and threatening. You need to stop. Stop investigating my family. Stop trying to sabotage this wedding. Stop trying to turn Marcus against me and my parents. I'm not trying to sabotage anything. I am trying to protect... You're trying to maintain control, Sienna snapped. You've had Marcus all to yourself for 38 years, and now that he's starting his own family, you can't handle it. So you're inventing problems, creating drama, anything to stay relevant in his life. That's not true, isn't it? First, you throw a tantrum about seating arrangements. Then you start making wild accusations about my father's business practices. What's next, Eleanor? Are you going to show up at the wedding and object during the ceremony? I am not throwing tantrums. I am trying to help Marcus avoid a bad investment. If you actually cared about him, instead of just his money, you'd listen to what I'm saying. The words were out before I could stop them, and I immediately regretted them.
Sienna's laugh was cold and humorless. His money? Eleanor, do you have any idea how much money my family has? Do you think we need Marcus's $250,000? That's pocket change to my father. He offered Marcus the Riverside Plaza opportunity as a courtesy, a way to include him in family business dealings. But clearly, you can't understand that because you've spent your entire life struggling financially, and you assume everyone else is as desperate as you are. I'm not desperate, I said quietly, and I'm not making this up. I have documentation. I don't care about your documentation. What I care about is that you're trying to poison Marcus's relationship with my family right before our wedding, and I'm not going to let that happen. Sienna, please, just ask Marcus to review the investment prospectus carefully. Ask him to verify the tenant commitments. I'm not making accusations. I'm raising legitimate concerns. No, Sienna said firmly. What you're doing is overstepping, massively, and it needs to stop now. Or what? I challenged. Or we'll reconsider whether you should be at the wedding at all. The threat hung in the air like a knife. You can't do that, I said, though my voice wavered. I'm his mother. And I'm going to be his wife, Sienna countered. Marcus has already agreed that if you continue to cause problems, it might be better if you didn't attend. We don't need the drama or the negativity on our special day. You're lying. Marcus would never agree to that. Are you sure about that, Eleanor? Because from where I'm standing, Marcus has made it pretty clear where his priorities lie. You're optional, remember? That was his word, not mine. I felt tears burning behind my eyes, but refused to let them fall. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction. I'd like to speak to Marcus directly. Marcus is done talking to you for today. You've upset him enough. He has a complicated surgery tomorrow morning and he needs to focus, not deal with his mother's manufactured crisis. This isn't manufactured. Goodbye, Eleanor. And please, for everyone's sake, let this go. Accept your role, show up at the wedding, sit at your table, and let Marcus start his new life without your interference. She hung up before I could respond. I stood in my kitchen, phone still pressed to my ear, shaking with rage and fear and heartbreak all mixed together. They were going to cut me out entirely.
Not just seat me near the service entrance, but potentially uninvite me altogether if I continued to cause problems. And the problem I was causing was trying to protect Marcus from losing $250,000 to a fraudulent investment scheme. How had everything gotten so twisted? How had trying to help my son become grounds for exclusion from his life? I sank into a chair at my kitchen table, feeling defeated. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was interfering. Maybe I should just accept that Marcus was an adult who could make his own decisions and his own mistakes. But then I looked at the research spread across my laptop screen. The fake tenant commitments, the impossible projected returns, the history of Sterling Ashford's questionable business dealings. This wasn't a mother being overprotective. This was real, and Marcus was in danger of losing everything he'd worked so hard to earn. I thought about what my own mother had told me all those years ago. You get to decide how this story ends. Sienna and Marcus thought they could silence me by threatening to uninvite me from the wedding. They thought fear of exclusion would make me back down and accept whatever they decided. They were wrong. If I was going to be excluded anyway, if I was already optional in Marcus's life, then I had nothing left to lose. And that made me dangerous. I opened my laptop and started composing an email. Not to Marcus this time, but to someone who might actually listen and have the power to do something about it. I found the contact information for the Oregon Department of Justice, Division of Financial Regulation. They had an investment fraud hotline and an online complaint form. I spent the next 2 hours filling it out in meticulous detail. I attached the prospectus for Riverside Plaza. I included screenshots of the tenant commitments and the evidence showing they were false. I documented Sterling Ashford's history of similar schemes. I explained that my son had invested $250,000 based on false information. Before I submitted it, I paused. This would have consequences. Big consequences. If the Division of Financial Regulation investigated and found evidence of fraud, Sterling Ashford could face serious legal trouble. The wedding might be delayed or canceled. The Ashford family would know I was responsible. Marcus would probably never forgive me. But if I didn't submit it, Marcus would lose $250,000, and possibly more. Who know what other schemes Sterling might pull him into once they're family? I thought about Marcus's words from that morning. You never asked me to make those sacrifices. Maybe he was right. Maybe I'd spent 30 years making sacrifices he never asked for, trying to protect him and provide for him even when he didn't appreciate it. But this was different. This wasn't about me or my hurt feelings or my need to feel valued. This was about preventing my son from being defrauded by the family he was marrying into. I clicked submit. The form went through and I received an automated confirmation email saying they'd review my complaint and contact me if they needed additional information. I closed my laptop and sat in the darkness of my kitchen, the only light coming from the street lamp outside my window. What had I just done?
Part of me felt righteously vindicated. I'd taken action to protect Marcus, even if he didn't know it, even if he'd hate me for it. But another part of me felt terrified. I'd just set in motion events that could destroy the Ashford family's reputation and business. I'd potentially ruined Marcus's wedding. I'd probably guaranteed that I'd never have a relationship with my son again. Was I right to do it? Or had I just made everything infinitely worse? My phone buzzed with a text message. For a moment, my heart leaped. Maybe it was Marcus finally calling me back. But it was from a number I didn't recognize. Mrs. Whitfield, this is Arabella Thornton. Sienna asked me to reach out regarding final wedding details. Could you confirm your attendance at the ceremony? Also, please note that the dress code is formal, no exceptions. Your cooperation is appreciated. Even the wedding planner was checking on me now, making sure I'd comply with their rules, reminding me to dress appropriately so I wouldn't embarrass anyone. I didn't respond to the text. Instead, I went to my closet and looked at that champagne gold dress hanging there, the one that had cost me $1,200 I couldn't afford, the one I'd bought to make the Ashfords happy, to fit into their world, to be acceptable. I took it off the hanger and laid it on my bed, staring at it.
Then I pulled out my phone and took a photo of the receipt from Madame Dupont's boutique that I'd saved. $1,200 for a dress I'd wear once to a wedding where I'd be hidden near the service entrance, treated as optional by my own son. I posted the receipt on my private Facebook page, the one Marcus wasn't connected to, but where I had friends from my teaching years, neighbors, people who actually cared about me. I wrote, "What should I do with a $1,200 dress bought for a wedding where I've been told I'm optional?" Within minutes, the comments started rolling in. "Optional? Eleanor, what happened? Who would call you optional? You're the sweetest person I know. That's awful. Don't go if they're treating you like that. Sounds like someone needs to be taught a lesson about respect." I read through the comments, feeling validated and supported in a way Marcus and Sienna had never made me feel. These people, my real friends, my community, they saw my worth even if my own son didn't. But I still didn't know what I was going to do. The wedding was in 3 weeks. The Division of Financial Regulation might not even investigate before then. Marcus hadn't called me back, Sienna had threatened to uninvite me from the wedding, and I'd just filed a complaint that could blow up the entire Ashford family empire. I'd wanted to show Marcus that I wasn't optional, that actions have consequences. Well, I'd set those consequences in motion. Now I just had to wait and see if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life or the bravest decision I'd ever made. Outside my window, Portland lay dark and quiet under a cloudy sky. Somewhere in that city, in a penthouse I could never afford, my son was probably sleeping peacefully, unaware that his mother had just pulled the pin on a grenade that would explode his perfect world. I finally went to bed around midnight, but sleep didn't come easy. And when it did, I dreamed of Table 47 near the service entrance where optional mothers were meant to sit in silence while their sons married into corruption and called it success. 3 weeks until the wedding. The countdown had begun. The 3 weeks following my complaint to the Division of Financial Regulation passed in a strange, suspended state of anxiety. I went about my daily routine, gardening, reading, running errands, but underneath everything was a constant hum of tension. Every time my phone rang, I wondered if it would be Marcus finally calling me back, or investigators wanting more information, or Sienna calling to officially uninvite me from the wedding. But for the first week, there was only silence. I didn't hear from Marcus. I didn't hear from the Division of Financial Regulation. Even Arabella's follow-up text stopped after I ignored the first 3. It was as if I'd been erased from the entire wedding narrative, which I suppose was exactly what they wanted. I spent those quiet days doing more research, unable to stop myself from digging deeper into the Ashford family's business dealings. What I found only confirmed my worst suspicions. Sterling had a pattern spanning decades, attract investors with impressive prospectuses, deliver disappointing results, settle suits quietly, then move on to the next project. He was skilled at staying just on the legal side of fraud, but barely. On day 9 after filing my complaint, I received a call from a woman named Patricia Hernandez, an investigator with the Oregon Division of Financial Regulation. "Mrs. Whitfield, this is Patricia Hernandez. I'm calling regarding your complaint about Riverside Plaza and Ashford Development Corporation. We've conducted a preliminary review of the materials you submitted, and we'd like to ask you some additional questions." My heart raced. "Of course, whatever you need." "First, can you confirm that your son Marcus Whitfield invested $250,000 in this project based on the prospectus you provided?" "Yes, he told me about it 2 months ago. He was excited because his future father-in-law was including him in a family investment opportunity." "And you have reason to believe the prospectus contains false or misleading information?" I walked her through everything I'd found. The fake tenant commitments, the unrealistic projected returns, Sterling's history of similar schemes. She listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes. "Mrs. Whitfield, I want to be honest with you," Patricia said when I finished. "What you've uncovered is concerning, and it aligns with some other complaints we've received about Mr. Ashford's business practices over the years. However, investigating someone like Sterling Ashford is complicated. He has expensive lawyers and powerful connections. If we move forward with a formal investigation, it will likely become public, and there will be significant fallout." "I understand," I said.
though my stomach was churning. I need to ask, have you discussed any of this with your son? Is he aware that you filed this complaint? No, he won't talk to me. His fiancée intercepted my message and told me to stop interfering. There was a pause. Mrs. Whitfield, I'm going to be frank with you. If we investigate and find evidence of fraud, your son may lose his entire investment regardless. The money might already be spent on other projects. Even if we shut down Riverside Plaza, there's no guarantee investors will recover their funds. I hadn't thought of that. I'd been so focused on exposing Sterling's fraud that I hadn't considered Marcus might lose his money anyway. But if you don't investigate, I said slowly, Sterling will keep doing this to other people. He'll pull Marcus deeper into his schemes. The fraud will continue. That's correct, Patricia confirmed, which is why we're moving forward. I'm calling to let you know that we're opening a formal investigation into Ashford Development Corporation and the Riverside Plaza project specifically. We'll be issuing subpoenas for financial records, conducting interviews, and reviewing all of Sterling Ashford's recent business activities. My breath caught. When? We're executing the subpoenas tomorrow morning. Mr. Ashford will be notified that he's under investigation by end of business day tomorrow. Tomorrow. The wedding was in 12 days. Mrs. Whitfield, you should prepare yourself for the possibility that your son will discover you initiated this investigation. Are you ready for that? Was I ready for Marcus to know I'd destroyed his future father-in-law's business right before his wedding? Was I ready for him to hate me forever? Yes, I said, because what else could I say? I'm ready. After I hung up, I sat in my living room for a long time, staring at nothing. I'd done it. I'd actually done it. By tomorrow evening, Sterling Ashford would know he was under investigation for fraud, and everything would start unraveling. The next day crawled by. I tried to distract myself with household tasks, but I kept checking my phone obsessively, waiting for the explosion I knew was coming. It came at 6:47 p.m. Marcus called, and before I could even say hello, he was screaming, "What did you do?" I'd never heard him so angry. His voice was raw with rage, and I could hear things crashing in the background. He was throwing things. Marcus, please calm down. Calm down? You filed a complaint with the state. You accused Sterling of fraud. They showed up at his office this morning with subpoenas. They're freezing his assets. The wedding, Mom, might have to be canceled because the estate is technically owned by the corporation that's now under investigation. I understand, I said, though my stomach was churning. I need to ask, what did you do, Mom? I was trying to protect you. Protect me? You've ruined my life. Sienna's family is devastated. Sterling might go to prison, and everyone knows it was you. Your name is on the complaint. They all know my mother did this. Your mother who you called optional? The words came out sharper than I intended. Your mother who you were going to hide at table 47? Oh my God, is that what this is about? You're so petty and vindictive that you're destroying people's lives over a seating arrangement? This isn't about seating, Marcus. This is about Sterling Ashford defrauding investors, including you. You were about to lose $250,000 to a fake development project. That's not true. Sterling explained everything to the investigators. It's all a misunderstanding. The tenants are still being finalized. That's why they weren't publicly announced yet. The returns are based on conservative market projections. Marcus, I have documentation. I don't care about your documentation. You went behind my back, you sabotaged my wedding, you humiliated Sienna's family, and for what? Because you couldn't handle not being the center of attention? Each word was a knife. That's not fair. No, what's not fair is having a mother who's so jealous of my happiness that she'll destroy it rather than let me have something she never had. Sienna was right about you. She said you couldn't handle losing control of my life, and I defended you. I told her you were just struggling with the transition, that you meant well, but she was right. You're toxic, Mom. You're poison. I felt something break inside my chest. Marcus, please listen to me.
I'm done listening to you. I'm done with your manipulation, your guilt trips, your desperate attempts to stay relevant in my life. As far as I'm concerned, you don't have a son anymore. Don't call me. Don't come to the wedding, if we even still have a wedding. Don't contact me ever again. Marcus, wait! The line went dead. I tried calling back immediately, but he'd blocked my number. I tried texting. The messages turned green, undelivered. My son had just disowned me.
I collapsed on my couch, finally letting myself break down completely. Not quiet tears this time, but ugly, gasping sobs that shook my whole body. 30 years of sacrifice, 30 years of unconditional love, and it had come to this? My son thought I was toxic, thought I'd done this out of jealousy and spite rather than love and concern. Maybe he was right. Maybe I had destroyed his life. Maybe I should have just sat at table 47 and kept my mouth shut and let him make his own mistakes. I cried until I had nothing left, until my throat was raw and my eyes were so swollen I could barely see. Then I just lay there, on my couch, in the darkness, feeling more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. The next morning, I woke up to find my doorbell ringing persistently. I dragged myself to the door, not caring that I looked terrible, and found Patricia Hernandez standing on my porch. "Mrs. Whitfield," she said, her expression sympathetic. "May I come in? There have been some developments." I let her in and made coffee while she set up her laptop at my kitchen table. "First, I want to say I'm sorry for what you're going through," Patricia said gently. "I heard your son's been in contact with our office trying to get the investigation stopped. He's not handling this well." "He hates me," I said flatly. "He thinks I did this to sabotage his wedding." "I know, and I want you to understand something important. Even if you regret filing the complaint, we can't stop the investigation now. We found evidence of systematic fraud that goes far beyond Riverside Plaza. Sterling Ashford has been running various schemes for years, and your complaint finally gave us enough cause to dig into all of it." She turned her laptop to show me spreadsheets, emails, financial records. "We've discovered at least 15 other investors who've lost money to Ashford's fake development projects over the past decade. The total amount is over $4 million. Your son's $250,000 is just a small part of it." I stared at the screen, overwhelmed. So Marcus really would have lost his money? Almost certainly. And based on what we're finding, Sterling would have kept pulling Marcus into more opportunities after the wedding. Once you're family, you become a regular target. We've seen this pattern. He finds wealthy professionals, marries them into the family, and systematically drains their assets over years. So Sienna... "We don't have evidence yet that Sienna is directly involved in the fraud," Patricia said carefully, "but she certainly benefits from it. The lifestyle she lives, the wedding she's planning, it's all funded by money stolen from investors. Whether she knows that explicitly or just chooses not to ask questions, we're not sure yet." I thought about Sienna's perfectly curated life, her expensive clothes, her casual attitude about money. Had she known what her father was doing? Or had she, like Marcus, been too dazzled by wealth to question where it came from? "There's something else," Patricia continued. "We need your help with something, and I want to be clear that you can refuse, but we're hoping you'll agree." "What is it?" "Sterling is currently moving assets offshore. We've tracked several large wire transfers to accounts in the Cayman Islands. We need to stop those transfers, but we need more time to get the court orders in place. In the meantime, we'd like to set up a meeting with him where we can gather additional evidence, and we think he's most likely to incriminate himself if he's trying to manipulate someone." "You want me to wear a wire?" I said slowly. "We want you to meet with Sterling and get him talking about the investments, about how he structures them, how he selects investors, what he tells them. If he thinks he can convince you to drop the complaint or persuade Marcus to provide false testimony, he might reveal details of how the fraud works." I thought about Marcus's words from the night before. "You're toxic, you're poison. If I do this, Marcus will never forgive me. This won't just be filing a complaint. This will be me actively working to put his future father-in-law in prison."
That's possible, Patricia admitted. But Mrs. Whitfield, Sterling Ashford has victimized dozens of people. He's still trying to victimize more. And your son is so deep in this family's influence that he can't see clearly. Sometimes love means protecting people even when they hate you for it. I looked at the evidence on her screen. 15 investors, $4 million, years of fraud, and Marcus, my brilliant son who'd worked so hard to become a surgeon, being groomed as the next victim. What do I need to do? 2 days later, I sat in a coffee shop in downtown Portland, wearing a wire taped to my chest, waiting for Sterling Ashford to arrive. Patricia and 2 other investigators were in a van outside, monitoring everything. We'd set up the meeting through Sienna, who'd reached out surprisingly readily when I'd sent a message saying I wanted to discuss resolving the situation before it destroyed Marcus's wedding. Sterling arrived exactly on time, looking every inch the successful businessman in his tailored suit and expensive watch. He sat across from me with a carefully practiced expression of concern mixed with warmth. "Eleanor," he said, reaching across to pat my hand in a fatherly gesture that made my skin crawl, "I'm so glad you agreed to meet. This whole situation has gotten so out of hand, and I think we can fix it if we just talk reasonably." "I hope so," I said, playing my part. I never wanted things to get this complicated.
Of course you didn't. You're a mother who loves her son. I understand that completely. I'd do anything for Sienna. He smiled warmly. The problem is, I think you've been given some misleading information about Riverside Plaza and my business practices. Someone, maybe a competitor, has fed you false data designed to make legitimate business deals look suspicious. I did a lot of research, I said carefully. I'm sure you did. And I'm sure what you found looked concerning if you don't understand commercial real estate development. He leaned forward, his tone becoming educational, almost condescending. Eleanor, these deals are complex. The tenant commitments you read about, those are in negotiation. We don't announce them publicly until contracts are finalized because we don't want to spook the market or give competitors advantages. That's standard practice. But the projected returns are based on comparable properties in similar markets. Yes, they're optimistic, but that's because I'm good at what I do. I've been developing properties for 40 years, and I know how to create value. He sat back, exuding confidence. The investigators will realize this once they review everything thoroughly. This whole investigation will be dropped within a month. You think so? I know so. I've dealt with regulatory inquiries before. They're fishing expeditions, bureaucrats justifying their budgets by harassing successful businessmen. It's annoying, but it always blows over. What about the other investors who complained? For just a moment, his mask slipped, and I saw something cold flash in his eyes, but he recovered quickly. Disgruntled people who made poor decisions and want someone to blame. Every business has a few of those. The key is not letting them derail legitimate opportunities. He leaned forward again. Eleanor, let me be frank with you. Marcus is going to be my son-in-law. He's going to be family. I've invested in his future. The Riverside Plaza opportunity was just the beginning. I'm planning to mentor him in real estate investment, help him build wealth beyond what he can earn as a surgeon. But I can only do that if we're family. If this wedding doesn't happen because of this investigation, Marcus loses everything. There it was. The threat disguised as opportunity. What are you saying? I'm saying that if you really love your son, you need to withdraw your complaint. Tell the investigators you made a mistake, that you misunderstood what you were reading. They'll have to drop the investigation if the primary complainant recants. And then Marcus can have his wedding, his future, everything he's worked for. And if I don't? Sterling's expression hardened. Then I'll make sure everyone knows that you destroyed your son's life out of spite. I have friends at every major hospital in Portland. I can make sure Marcus's reputation is destroyed. I can make sure he never gets another promotion, another opportunity.
I can make his life very difficult, Eleanor. Is that what you want? You're threatening my son to get me to withdraw my complaint about you defrauding him? I'm offering you a choice, Sterling said coldly. Protect your son's future or destroy it. What kind of mother are you? In the van outside, Patricia was recording every word. The kind of mother, I said quietly, who won't let criminals manipulate her son, no matter what it costs me. Sterling's face transformed into something ugly. You stupid woman, do you have any idea what you've done? I could have made Marcus rich. I could have set him up for life. Instead, you've guaranteed that he'll hate you forever while losing everything. Maybe, but at least he won't lose it to you. Sterling stood abruptly. You'll regret this, and so will Marcus. When this investigation falls apart and all you've accomplished is ruining his wedding and his relationship with Sienna's family, he'll never forgive you. He stormed out of the coffee shop. I sat there, shaking, as Patricia's voice came through the small earpiece I was wearing. We got everything, Mrs. Whitfield. The threats, the admission that he's used these tactics before, even the implication that he was planning to pull Marcus into more schemes. This is exactly what we needed. But I felt no triumph, only exhaustion and sadness. The next week passed in a blur of legal proceedings. Sterling was officially charged with multiple counts of investment fraud. The wedding was officially postponed indefinitely. Sienna's family assets were frozen, pending investigation, and Marcus didn't call. I received one text from Sienna. I hope you're happy. You've destroyed everything. The day that would have been the wedding, I spent in my garden, pulling weeds and trying not to think about what might have been. I'd saved Marcus from financial ruin, but I'd lost him in the process. That evening, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Marcus standing on my porch. He looked terrible, unshaven, exhausted, his eyes red-rimmed. "Can I come in?" he asked, quietly. I stepped aside, afraid to hope. We sat in my living room, silence stretching between us. Finally, Marcus spoke. "The federal investigators came to see me yesterday. They showed me everything, not just Sterling's fraud, but the pattern, how he was setting me up to be victimized for years, how Sienna knew enough about her father's business to be considered complicit." He looked at me with devastated eyes. "They said if you hadn't filed that complaint, I would have lost everything eventually. My savings, my career, everything." I waited, not trusting myself to speak. "I called you toxic. I told you I didn't have a mother anymore. And the whole time you were protecting me.